Hey, it's Michael. If you've been on a Zoom with me lately, you'll notice that you have my full attention. It's because I'm not taking notes. Instead, I rely on Fellow, an AI meeting assistant, to take notes for me, along with tracking action items and decisions, handling recordings, transcripts, and summaries all in one secure platform. It's kind of like magic. Built with security and privacy at its core, Fellow is the only AI meeting assistant that thousands of leaders and organizations trust to capture meeting notes and recordings while keeping your data safe. They're so confident that you'll love it, they're offering an insane deal to you all, Between Two COOs listeners. 90 days of unlimited AI-powered note-taking and recording completely free. Visit fellow.app/COO to sign up today and experience the AI meeting assistant trusted by leaders everywhere.
You don't expect to suddenly question oh my gosh, what's going to happen with the money that we're that's in the bank. And we like many other companies, we had payroll the following week, and we had to think about how do we make sure that we can pay our employees. And uh, it was probably the craziest. It happened on a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I don't think I slept a wink.
Hello and welcome to Between Two COOs. I'm your host, Michael Koenig, and I'm shaking it up today by bringing on Linda Tong, the CEO of Webflow, the leading visual development platform for building a professional web presence without writing a single line of code. While Linda now leads the company from the top, her tenure at Webflow began as COO and president, where she served as the connective tissue across the business, running sales, marketing, education, support, people, ops, finance, legal. You get the idea. That operator's mindset still shapes how she scales Webflow today. Prior to Webflow, Linda was the CEO at App Dynamics, the VP of Product at Innovation at NFL, Chief Product Officer at Tapjoy, and Product at Google. Linda also holds board seats at Prezi and Hex and is generally just a wonderful person. Linda, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. Love being here.
Let's talk about AI. Webflow, one of the leading web platforms out there, 300,000 customers. With the way the web is changing from AI search results to bot traffic, how are you thinking about this at Webflow, and how do you build for this new age?
Gosh, it is. It's probably the most exciting time ever. And I mean, I say this as if it's right now. It's been the past few years, but every day there's something new happening in AI. And for us at Webflow, it is a massive opportunity, right? The vision of the company has always been to bring developer superpowers to everyone. And what that has meant is being able to, in our present day form, allow people to build websites visually. What AI unlocks is the ability to go even further. So whether you're building a website, a web app, or just an app in general, or just anything with code, AI accelerates our ability to actually fulfill that vision, which is not only incredibly exciting, but is it's an accelerant across the board that I don't think anyone saw coming. And so that we're spending every day thinking about how do we go faster and how do we unlock value for our customers.
Speed is totally off the wall these days. I built a platform for OKR in just messing around. It was with Lovable, not Webflow. I apologize. Maybe I'll go back. I'll build it again with Webflow. But I was just tinkering around, and over in 48 hours for the cost of $100, I had a fully fledged app, which would have cost me $1.5 million and taken 18 months to build previously. Talk about that acceleration, because I imagine at the scale of Webflow, when you actually have incredible engineers, it must be off the charts.
Oh yeah, it is. Gosh, on both sides of it, it's incredible because one, there's a transformation on an individual level, the productivity gains that you get when now you have AI supporting you in what you're doing, whether it's generating code and accelerating the path to actually developing features and functionality, to writing test cases and reviewing that, or fixing errors, or building context around really complex, platform, to other parts of the business where I'm seeing people leverage AI for content creation, for automating really complex functions that honestly, as humans, we couldn't do before. So we're running hundreds of experiments on our website that we can start to automate using this product AI Optimize, which is part of the IntelliMize suite that we purchased a year ago. AI is in every single part of our business, not only in what we unlock for our customers, but in how we operate ourselves. And so it's just created this productivity boom. The other thing that's happened is it is unlocked, I was kind of hinting at it, but it's unlocked capabilities that we never had before, right? Because it's not about AI replacing people or workers or whatnot. I know there's a lot of talks about that, but I think AI actually is an amazing partner, and its ability to help me unlock things that I never would have spent time doing before. So whether it's helping me take away some of the drudgery or actually giving me superpowers personally to handle things at like exponential levels that I hadn't considered. So a good example is I was putting together a set of experiments to think about how do I start running, on some of my own personal stuff. I was like, how do I start to run multivariate tests across thousands of different elements on a website? That would have just been impossible to do before. But with AI, it can actually start to automate these things and suggest what things I should be testing, suggest what like different variants should be created, create those for me, and then actually run those tests and then select winners. That's just something that people didn't do before. It was a great thing to talk about, but you simply just can't do it manually.
And it wasn't easy.
No,
Even
was really
doing just
complex.
like an A/B test, two variants, was really complex to do.
And it took multiple developers, and it took like a lot of time to find stat sig. And then when you're done, half the time you're like, I don't even know what to do, right? Like these are like really basic things that we could talk about, but technically it was just really expensive. And now that cost has gone away, and it now becomes really exciting in terms of how do we start to take things that were relatively static and turn them dynamic? Because I think AI really unlocks the dynamism of what you can create and how you create it.
Well, because this is an ops podcast, you mentioned how it's transforming your operations. Like, what are some things that come to mind? What has been, I guess, the biggest surprise to you?
Oh man, it's I think the biggest surprise, because it's I would say at the beginning of this transformation, there are a lot of people who are like, oh, AI is going to come from my job. AI is going to sort of like, we're going to just cut all this headcount. And there are also entire groups of people who are resistant to AI. They're like, oh, it's not good enough, or it can't quite do it. And it's, people are feeling like they're getting DDoS by AI, right? Because it's like creating all this like kind of shitty content.
Mm-hmm.
What was really surprising is, one, the quality at which all these models have improved. And it's like days or weeks, between new models. And so the quality of what you can actually create has fundamentally shifted. But the other part of it are the ways that people are leveraging it. The obvious ways that people thought about were like, oh, like write documents for me, do some coding for me.
Mm-hmm.
And like, that's great. What's really cool is, actually today is my 3-year anniversary with Webflow. And one of the ways I was using AI, I thank you. One of the ways I was using AI that I hadn't considered before was I actually fed it all of my historical documents, my email, and my calendar. And I was like, write me a summary of the past 3 years of my time. And it's just, these are things that I probably would never even considered doing before, because it would just been so time consuming unless I'd actually like put something together that would allow me to summarize this information really easily. I can now ask AI, different GPTs or whatnot, really interesting questions and queries that I never would have considered before, and actually do work that was never work that I would have done. And it's amazing how accurate it was, how effectively it actually summarized the 3 years. And it was really fun to just read through it and see what happened, in my time here at Webflow.
Some of those things you mentioned, it's unlocked things you never would have done before. There's this 3-year summary that you went through, and what kind of insights did that give you? Because I've actually never do. You hit an anniversary, a milestone, and you're like, oh, I've been here for a while. I remember like this happened once before, and I expected to have this like big retrospect, and then I was like, no, I literally don't have time. Like I just great. It's great. Okay, moving on.
Yeah, I mean, it's one. There's I think for people who have been like go go go, I've similar to you, I've never really taken a vacation like between jobs or anything. And so I've never actually taken the time to truly reflect. It was an amazing experience actually to sit back and see how much has happened in the past 3 years. And also like selfishly feel a little bit proud of what I've done. Like very rarely do you like take those moments to be like, oh, have I added value? Have I accomplished anything?
Hmm.
And to actually feel that way was like amazing, also incredibly humbling because, none of these things are individual accomplishments. They're things that we do together as a team. And I feel so proud of like what everyone at this company has done over the past 3 years. It's been a wildly transformative couple of years. And Webflow is like a very different place from the place I joined.
Yeah, and what a cool time to be there,
Yeah,
right? When all of this
absolutely incredible.
transformation is happening.
Yeah. I mean, and we have some of the most incredible talent. I mean, the things that I'm seeing people build, I can't say exactly what's coming, through the hopper, but
Yeah.
the innovation that's happening, the speed at which it's happening, the like excitement in our AI channels where people are just talking about cool things they've done. I mean, I'm seeing people share really cool experiences, and it's it's just such an empowering moment in time. This weekend, like I was building an app for myself because I'm like taking a trip and I was like, oh, I want to build this app that'll allow me to like tag all my favorite places and add my photos and create this like timeline view and a map view of everything I'm doing.
Mhm.
I never would have done that before. Like
Yeah.
it took me, I don't know, 6.5 hours to build this thing and like get everything that I wanted into it and like format it and design it. But it's been amazing.
That's awesome. Well, there is so much going on. And I know in the past you've said no year is predictable and like constantly have to iterate. How do you maintain clarity and focus for your teams when just the platform dynamics are shifting so rapidly around AI?
I mean, I think I'm really lucky. It's for some companies, I think AI is great, but maybe it offers productivity improvements, right? And that's really how that can be an accelerant. For us, AI is a direct like improvement and accelerant to our vision. Like the space that we're in is like the perfect space to not only be disrupted but like fundamentally transformed by AI. And for us, like our vision is about bringing the power of code to everybody. And I can't imagine a technology that does that better than AI right now. And like when you pair that with our core differentiator of being a visual first platform that allows you to really like tweak and interact with it, it's kind of a match made in heaven. So I think I'm just really lucky in that the opportunity and the transformation that's happening in the industry right now is directly aligned to what we want to do as a company. And so staying focused on our mission becomes that much more clear. The thing that's wildly disruptive is we used to joke about where Webflow was going and how we were going to unlock all these capabilities and get there incrementally. And, I was saying it's a 3-year vision, it's a 5-year vision or a 10-year vision. Because, you know, if you subtract AI from the picture, really, it was going to take a long time to get there. But now with AI, I'm like, man, it's really just compressed that timeline. And I
Sure.
think we're going to be able to unlock our long-term vision in a very short amount of time. And it's so exciting. But that's really what the shift has been for us.
Sure. And then it's, well, what's the next vision, right? The
Yeah,
longer term, grander thing
yeah,
that maybe we didn't even think about because it was so audacious. And
yeah,
now it becomes something that is potentially attainable.
yeah. Well, I mean, and I think that is we're starting to see that. For me, for us, though, it's always been how can you create,
Hmm.
right? Creation was sort of the beginning. I think now, I've built so many apps using everything: Cursor, Lovable, V0, Bolt, Webflow. Um, the thing that no one talks about is, you've now created like, I don't know, 50, 60, 70 apps, and you've dropped a couple $100. What are you doing with them?
Hmm.
Continuous like life cycle management, iterating on those things, adding value, sharing them. Like, what is the purpose of creating these things if they're just going to turn into like internet garbage, right? Like, there needs to be this ongoing purpose and curation and iteration. And I think this next phase is how do we start to do that at scale? And how do we create the tools and technology that allow people to take the ideas that they've turned into something and really grow them into something meaningful? And I think that's sort of the next age. And I think that's where Webflow is going to continue to push. We've talked about owning the full web lifecycle. Now I want us to own the full code lifecycle.
Hmm. You talked about transformation and disruption, two words that like have always been involved in tech, but now are just so much more weighted. Let's talk about websites in general and the future of the web. how do you think about designing for both humans and now agent bots? Like, how does that change things?
It is, it's really fascinating. I fundamentally believe that there needs to be um, either a standard or just like a new practice. Websites that are created for humans are created for experience and for beauty and for layout and structure and design. What an agent really wants to do is more effectively understand, index, and like source the right content for your site to more effectively surface it and like recognize that information, whether it's in results, like a chat result, or in terms of understanding the content to be able to provide more intelligence. And the way that sites are designed right now, a bot or an agent scraping it is highly inefficient. And I think we need to come up with like a new standard of how an agent could actually navigate a site, interact with it, and then ultimately, like actually drive some of these actions through it. And it just needs to be thought of as its own thing. And right now, we're too busy just trying to get a great website out there that we're not thinking about two versions of it. I think the other thing that's challenging is, where people are seeing their traffic now split between the two, they're starting to try and optimize this one website for two very different audiences. Because, how you rank in an LLM search is fundamentally different from how you think about SEO. And so if you start blending these things, I don't know what that's going to do to your, search volume or traffic volume. And so there's a fundamental shift happening right now on the web in terms of how do we manage traffic coming from all these different sources, and how do you optimize for the sort of the recipient, right? Whether it's the human or whether it's an agent. And so we're thinking a lot about that at Webflow. We've been studying a lot of what's happening with SEO, and more importantly, how do you think about actually finding, ranking and surfacing your content effectively within an LLM, any sort of, ChatGPT or whatnot. And we're starting to think about like, how might the web look when you actually have two versions of a website?
What you just mentioned in terms of the disruption of that top of funnel, the engine optimization, which is this new AI thing. It's, what is it being called? Answer engine optimization, I think, AEO.
Yeah, AEO. So I'm seeing AEO, GEO, AIO. It's like all over the place, but probably the most prominent is AEO, I think.
Yeah. It's what's so interesting about it is you see sites like Stack Overflow, for instance, their traffic just tanks.
Yeah.
And now how do we think about, how do we make up that different traffic? And people, I'm sure you get the question all the time, but I've gotten the question, which is like, how do I think about surfacing my site or my brand within an agent, an LLM rather?
Yeah.
Like, how do you guys think about it? How do you approach it? Because you've got how many hundreds of thousands of sites out there that are probably all wondering the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's going to be a different question for everybody. So, for example, let's say you're just like, startup A, and your website is there to drive signups that ultimately drive customer engagement into your web application. So, let's say you're just building like a simple, I don't know, an e-commerce site, and you want someone to like sign up and buy stuff. It's not necessary for you to actually get the same traffic back, because actually, like, you're probably moving further down the funnel, and what you want to do is be able to get people to that conversion faster. So maybe it's less traffic, but maybe it's more about surfacing whatever you're selling more effectively within, as any sort of like, a ChatGPT or a Perplexity or a Claude, or, still maintaining some amount of SEO for organic search. And if the question is, how do I drive more conversions? Then it's really about figuring out how do you surface the content and the call to action more effectively, versus someone else who might be pure traffic because they're looking for generating eyeballs and getting people to come in and interact with, like a Stack Overflow. The value of it is that it's so much user generated content. And so it's a very different approach that I would take if you're really like focused on that traffic and interaction that actually is a sort of, a self-fulfilling cycle of value in terms of people creating content and coming back for more. So one, I think it's figuring out what's the question that you're asking. Like, what is the goal that you're trying to accomplish with your website, and like, what should you be optimizing for? I think the second part of it is is like understanding based off of what you're trying to optimize for. There are different tricks that are already out there to drive relevance, right? So what we've already seen with AEO is, there's heavier weightings for like freshness of your content. So refreshing your content regularly is important. Influencers and like sort of these very like opinionated communities, like a Reddit is like actually a very important part of how you rank. Like great content on Reddit actually gives you a much heavier weighting in, a chat GPT. And so really optimizing for your community strategy and your content that's coming from influencers or like very real user generated content, I think is important. And then like, then you have consistent themes across like, what are the other sources that you're, just distributing content on. So not just first party, but third party, because like where you're being sourced matters a lot. And then I think the last bit is like actually the value of your content. Like there's people who sort of generate I don't know, call it the Business Insider clickbait type of articles. And then there's people who are putting like very real value into what they're saying, writing a blog post that's giving like strong examples, really differentiated perspectives and points of view and like cold hard facts, things that you're able to walk away with like some real meat on the bone. That just performs significantly better, right? It gets referenced. It starts to generate a lot more sort of contextual value. And so I think like even the content strategy is not about volume, it's about quality. So those kinds of shifts we've already seen help people rank more effectively in AEO and are things that I think are in general like good things to do anyway. And so that's where, I would push people now while we figure out how do we start to like interact very differently with these different sources.
Yeah, and potentially even though you may have a traffic drop, the traffic that is coming through is potentially more meaningful. It's potentially more valuable.
It may, I mean, most people by the time they get to your website nowadays probably know a lot more about you than they did in the past. And so, potentially like it'll vary obviously by site, but like hopefully the site, the traffic that's coming in through some sort of, like some sort of agentic search or LLM, in theory, is going to come in more informed and potentially convert faster. And you're going to see a higher conversion rate because hopefully they actually have done some research on you and are coming in with higher intent than maybe historical, like standard SEO organic search traffic. But I've seen it vary quite a bit across, everybody. So I can't say for sure that that's what's happening, but I can say in certain instances, I'm seeing that.
What I'm hearing is there's a core thing here that is actually unchanged from SEO, and that is the quality content that is an authority. In what you're seeing and what I'm hearing is, even though the amount of garbage that's on the web has just exploded, the quality is still hopefully what's going to be filtered to the top.
Absolutely.
What's your favorite LLM? What do you go to?
It depends on what I'm doing.
Okay.
Right. If I am, trying to find a partner to, whether I'm writing a board memo or an email, I've created my own GPT with ChatGPT that sort of like knows my tone and voice and how I write. So ChatGPT is my writing partner. I use 4.0, and then for coding, I'm using Claude Sonnet 4.0 or Sonnet 4. And then outside of that, like I've played a lot with Gemini. Haven't really done nearly as much with it, but Notebook LM has been a total killer for me. It's been awesome.
You're CEO. You're talking about coding still. What are you coding? How do you have time to code?
I mean, I have nights and weekends, and it's so fast now. No, but really, I think, I don't think you can lead right now in this time and in this space if you don't like put your hands on the technology and feel it and understand it. It's moving so rapidly that I can't possibly imagine a world where I'm not trying to build a skilled set myself. So I have a lot of like hobby projects, nothing that I'm particularly proud of, but it's really exciting and awesome to learn because just understanding the nuances of, how to prompt effectively or how to get the kinds of outcomes I want or where I need to be really specific if I want to fix like an error or if I'm just trying to like put together sort of like a simple UI. These are all things that the only way you can learn them is just to do it. And, it's a fun time. And also I think it's just like, I'm naturally curious and I want to know, like, what could I possibly do here? So it's fun.
That's awesome. Notebook. All right. I haven't tried Notebook. I will check it out.
My favorite use case with Notebook LM is when I have to just ingest a ton of information, basically upload the different, obviously with respect to privacy policies inside of your company, but like upload the information that you want to consume. And you can either generate a podcast and it's like this fun podcast you can listen to and it'll like actually explain it to you. Or you can actually just use it as like a buddy and ask it questions and be like, hey, tell me about this or explain this to me. Or I'm thinking about taking this approach. Tell me why this content would like, tell me why I shouldn't. But it's basically an expert based off of what you teach it. And, I think like almost everyone and their mother, downloaded that Mary Meeker report that was like 340 some odd pages, popped it into like Notebook LM and created a podcast, like a 25-minute podcast. And it's awesome. I still read the whole report, but it was just amazing to get it summarized in such a coherent and articulate way. And it took, a couple minutes.
Only because you brought it up, the Mary Meeker's report this year, what was the thing that you took away where thinking back to it, like, oh, that Mary did it again? What was it?
I mean, one, just like the data is just really fascinating. I think if I have to pick one thing.
Or not.
Or not. I mean, like
anything.
There's two really interesting things about Mary Meeker's reports in general. Like one, she's very clearly capturing these trends and articulating the changes that are happening. The thing that is just when you look at the data, right, when she puts these into graphs and visualizes the changes that are happening, the thing that's like really out of this world compared to any other tech trend that I've seen in the past ever, right? Historical, whatever, not. The rate of adoption of AI has just been so out of this world. I mean, like it basically is this like exponential curve upwards. I think 10 years ago, people were like, oh my God, crypto and like blockchain. And it's still big, but, it kind of like faded out. AI is one of those trends where it's come and like you look at these graphs and you look at how she's talking about the adoption. This isn't going to fade out. It's actually still accelerating, which is crazy to think about. And it's just one of those things that I can't even begin to imagine what's going to happen next because it's just been so earth shattering. Like every couple of weeks, the kinds of things that are becoming real. And just seeing that in her report, she's such a voice of authority on all these things. And so, for her to have covered all these major technical shifts in this world and for her to even lay out AI as this like transformative is like such a downplayed word, but it's just like, yeah, it's so wildly transformative and you see it. It's like the first like 10 pages of her deck and you're like, oh my God, the world is going to be so different in 1 year. Like I can't even, everything I'm saying right now is probably going to be a joke and irrelevant because it's going to be so wildly different. And that's the stuff that just gets me because I can't even imagine what it'll look like. I can't even see that far into the future and the future is so close.
Yeah. So it's funny just being a tech dad with crypto and everything. I tried to explain it to my kiddos. This is a while back now. They were much younger. And I'm like, I'm going to buy you some Bitcoin. You're just going to have it. It's going to go along and we'll see where it is. Maybe, you'll buy your first house with it or something like that.
Oh my God.
Right? They were just like, yeah, okay, cool. Thanks. But we talked about AI and they actually care about it. And they're the power users of Sora. Like they just do. It started off just like the image. I want to dive right into the images something that like we previously talked about are hilarious. The first one they did was put together a picture of a cat doing its taxes floating in outer space.
Oh my God.
It's fat. Like Sora nailed it.
That's just awesome.
So anyways, definitely a much bigger shift. It hasn't hit my mom yet, but that's okay. How do you create and foster a culture of innovation and get people to solve problems in different audacious ways?
I think a big part of it is putting people into situations where they have to change their own behavior. If you are given a problem and you're working with the same team you've worked with, you're going to approach the problem the same way. And they're going to probably approach how they work with you the same way. So if you start to change that environment by bringing different people together with different backgrounds, and then just put out there a simple prompt, which is, what's your other solution? So besides the first thing you come up with, what's a second solution? What's another way to think about this? You can start to get people to think about alternative ways to solve similar problems and start to bring in insight from sources that they may not have previously used. And I think that's the very starting point of creating a culture of innovation, because it's just about thinking differently about how you solve some of the same problems that we face day to day.
It's a simple question. What else would you do? How else would you solve it? Okay, I heard what you said the first time. Now answer it again. Is basically it.
Pretty
That's
much.
amazing. And now part of that, though, is creating sort of a culture, an environment, an atmosphere where people feel comfortable to spit out that second, more, perhaps it's off the wall, perhaps they're not necessarily confident in what they're saying with that answer. How do you do that? I know you are an expert at creating trust amongst teams. How do you do that?
A lot of it is people are afraid to present ideas that they're afraid that others might look down on or consider failures or think of as bad ideas. And if you create a space where the ideation elements or the ideation phase is really about just getting things out there that you can quickly just align on, address, or dismiss, is a safe space for people to just throw things against the wall. And you have to actually create that environment and say, this is the moment where we're going to throw things against the wall. I think in addition to that, celebrating really bad ideas and celebrating the fact that people are coming up with that, I think creates a safe space, just a psychologically safe space for people to even think outside of the normal realm of the constraints that they put on themselves. And by doing that, I think it allows you to just open up the aperture of what people consider, how they think, what angles they're taking at a problem. And by doing that, I think that's where you start to get areas of psychological safety that then become the foundation of that underlying trust to even engage and present, some of these ideas that aren't standard or typical.
How do you celebrate a really bad idea?
Literally celebrating it, right? If someone's coming in and coming up with an idea that you're like, it makes no sense, you can't turn around and be like, that's a terrible idea, or no way, it's never going to work. I think you have to take the idea and run with it and say, awesome, didn't even think about it this way. I'm so impressed that you actually came at it at this angle and completely ignored some of these things that we probably would have used as constraints in a prior world. Let's take this one step further. How might we actually put this idea into play? How might we think about it differently? And by even engaging in it and leaning into it and demonstrating that this is something that we can continue to iterate on and think through, shows that the idea has some sort of validity. You may not actually pursue it at the end of the day, but by not quickly dismissing it, I think is probably the first step in giving people that safety to come up with these potentially bad ideas and to celebrate them.
That takes a lot of patience, right? If, say, I came with just a crazy idea for this podcast, I can't think of one right now. If we just talked about like amazing bets that we've placed on sports teams, right? I don't think anyone would really enjoy it. Well, maybe some, maybe I'm onto something, but we would be almost eating up a lot of time, right? Almost losing that. But in the context of a team is what I'm hearing, that it's okay because it's the process that matters.
Absolutely. I think when teams are coming together to form ideas and then ultimately execute on them, think about those as two different phases. You have this divergence phase where you are diverging and thinking about all the possibilities, and then you're converging on an approach. In that divergent phase, if you time box yourself in a really limited fashion such that you can't explore ideas and you can't play them out, then you're really going to limit the kind of ideas that come in. And so I think it's not worrying about giving ideas that kind of space, because it's actually the cheapest time to play out those ideas. You're literally like ideating on them and talking about them and thinking about it and imagining a future. That is the cheapest way to test that idea. Once you get to the convergence phase and you start throwing resources at it and executing, that gets really expensive, and you better have thought that one through. And so it's actually a really cheap way to give yourself space to play with that idea versus quickly dismissing it. And I think that's a great way to give people that space to actually think through the mechanics of it, explore why it could work or why it can't. What are the merits? What are the failures? And actually understand what are some of the underlying things that fed into it. So for example, going back to what you said, what if you did a podcast just talking about some of the biggest bets that we've made in sports? People might not like that, but what they might like about it, or what this audience might like about it, is the fact that we'd be talking about bets that inherently represent how we think about risk and risk tolerance and how risk is represented in decisions that we make. So are you making a ton of small bets and probably having a low EV? Or are you making a couple of really big bets that if they hit, it's a huge winner, and they miss, you lose everything? Where are you on that risk spectrum? And that risk spectrum might be a really interesting topic for this audience.
That is. I like how you brought that together and made my bad idea actually a good one. Now,
Should we switch to talking about sports bets?
should we? I think so. Well, let's talk about it. As a leader, you control how you react. So when you're in those let's come up with bad ideas moments, or let's come up with every idea and celebrate bad idea moments, you can certainly encourage and react in the way that you think will be, most encouraging. But what about the rest of the team? What about everyone else in the room?
I think a big part of it is leadership is an opportunity to demonstrate how you want others to show up. And as a leader, the way I show up typically starts to set the example for others. And, where people in the room fail to open up their minds in that space and either don't want to engage, or maybe they do reflect that kind of activity and they do engage, that's just a team dynamic, right? That's like, did you bring the right people together? Did you level set appropriately and set expectations on what it is that we're trying to do with this time and space? And are we giving everyone space to actually come up with ideas? Because what we want to celebrate is the ability to think differently about how we solve problems, think outside of the box, and do really, really cheap iteration on this. And if people are starting to jump into the wrong phase of where we are as a business, that's where I'll lean in as a leader and say, hey, I get that you don't love this idea, but let's take it one step further. What can you get out of it? What can you learn? What are the merits of it? What are the failures of it? But let's talk through it. And it's about continuing to set those expectations on what is it as a group that we're trying to accomplish. And more importantly, what are the expectations of how this conversation should be going? Because oftentimes people are just probably at different points in that timeline of where we are. And I see myself as being the facilitator of that discussion and leading by example, and then creating the bounds where people start to step out.
So now let's pull back, because we dove into specific meetings and solving specific problems. Pulling back, how do you, as a leader, paint the big picture, the big vision for your team? And how do you help them understand their role in achieving it on an ongoing basis? Not just once, but just ongoing.
It's challenging where the functions that report into me are like G&A functions and go-to-market functions. It's really easy actually to paint that bigger picture and align it to like an R&D team. Because in many cases, especially in technology, the vision and the future of a company is inherently tied to your product and your product strategy. And so that's usually a really easy conversation to be had. When it comes to go-to-market functions, a lot of it is them taking that vision and making it real and bringing it to customers. It's pretty easy to consume. But for G&A functions, they're like, how is me managing an IT stack at this company unlocking the future of our company strategy? And so a lot of that is twofold. One, articulating that vision so people understand why we exist as a company, where we want to go, and what we want to deliver to our customers is super important. And they may not need to be people who directly contribute to actually writing code and delivering product. But the second part of it is understanding what role they do play, because the company isn't just a bunch of engineers and product managers delivering product and a couple of people selling it and marketing it. A whole company comes together because every function is necessary for a business to operate effectively. Building products by themselves in isolation, you don't get a company. Selling something by itself, you don't get a company. Running accounting books, you don't get a company. You need all of these pieces, and understanding why each piece is important, how it needs to come together to support the company as it starts to transform and change at scale, and creating that empathy across teams is actually what's the most important thing about aligning people to that vision. Because everyone needs to see that, one, their function is absolutely critical in the success of the business. And more importantly, their peers need to understand how their functions integrate and operate with each other, so that there isn't this sort of, oh, we're the drivers and everybody else is the supporting cast. It's everybody needs to come together, because the recipe to success requires everybody being on this ship, rowing in the same direction and fully aligned. And so it's really empathy about functional alignment.
And how do you reinforce that on an ongoing basis? Say someone new to the company starts, right? How do you bring them on board? How do you get them involved?
Yeah, I mean, depending on who that person is, and there's one, helping them understand the vision, which every net new employee, it's about making sure onboarding experiences touch on the most important pieces of what are we doing? What are we here for? What's the mission? And then what is your role in that? And so depending on, regardless of what function they're in, understanding how they impact the team that they work on day to day and how the team they work on impacts the company is a really important set of connections that have to be made in the first, I would call it the first 30 days. And with all of the people who come in, a lot of it is continuing to reinforce that message about what does every group do at Webflow for me? What does every function do? Why are they important? And we do these regular conversations where we showcase, we have props channels or we have wins channels where we talk about what are some of the highlights and what are the efforts that teams are driving. And we celebrate them on a regular basis so people can see, one, what our teams are doing, but two, how they relate to our goals. All of this work that people are doing are tied to things like our OKRs. Our OKRs are tied to our company's strategy, and we show how those actually cascade into each other. And so when you start to celebrate those individual efforts that roll into an OKR, that rolls into our company goals, you can start to see how everything comes together. And so we have to do a good job of celebrating every individual effort and every team that actually contributes to that, and just doing that on a regular basis so people can see it.
And all the more difficult when you're in a remote environment. You mentioned having channels in Slack for those props. What are some other ways that you found that are very conducive to making people feel appreciated?
For me personally, my own style is actually private one-on-one conversations. I'm a person that doesn't, one, that love crowds, and I feel weird giving people public props. I tend to send people private, one-off, very personalized messages. So that's just my own style. I think everyone has their own style. But I definitely take moments every week to sit back and think to myself, what are some awesome things that happened this week that I want to make sure I recognize in the moment and celebrate so that it doesn't, one, go unnoticed, and people don't feel like there isn't that level of gratitude or consideration for the efforts that they put in. But two, it also is just a really nice reminder every week of how much progress our teams are making, because people are coming in every week and just they're working hard and they're driving things forward, and knowing that someone is aware and appreciates it is really important. And I do that on a pretty regular basis. But in addition to that, we do have a lot of, part of my job is scaling and operating this business. And as we get to a much larger scale, it becomes impossible to have an eye on everything. And so we do have what I would say are programs or systems that we've created that can help create some of these positive cycles. So we have individual recognition programs where folks can recognize their peers, managers can do spot bonuses for individuals who are going above and beyond. Our props channel is really public, so anyone in the company can props anyone else. We also have different wins channels. So for every function, sometimes like we have a sales wins channel. So as different people close deals, we're celebrating and highlighting these things. So we've kind of created different motions for different groups tied to the kind of operating rhythms that they have where we can incorporate celebration.
Now, how do you keep an eye or stay informed about what's actually happening on the front lines, those little wins? How do you know what's going on?
Twofold. One, I still spend a ton of time going through every Slack channel. I like to look at that stuff, and I like to spend time every day feeding through it. I know that's not going to scale infinitely. I know we're probably going to reach a breaking point. And then the other part of it is through my leadership team. We have a regular leadership team check-in. And as we check in, we always have an allocated time for top of mind to check in on how your team's doing, what's going on, what are you working on, what's the latest and greatest, where do you need help? And a lot of times you can start to surface things like these big wins that their teams have had, and we can celebrate each other or send props to folks on the teams. But we make sure that we have those regular rhythms so that at least at any given point, you can ask me, what are the functional teams that are reporting to me? What are their top 2 or 3 priorities? And I can tell you pretty consistently. One, because of those check-ins. And then two, people are actually quite good at updating, their OKRs and things like that. So if I ever feel like I'm out of the loop, I can usually check in on those systems.
You mentioned the word empathy a couple of times. It's thrown around so much. What does that empathy really mean in this context? When you're talking about it, when you're thinking about it and applying it to a culture and applying it to your team?
Gosh, There's so much that goes into that. It's, to me, being an empathetic leader is recognizing two things. One, every person is more than just an employee. There's a 360-degree person that you're working with, and they have their work life, and then they have all the other things that make up who they are. And things are spiking or peaking and valleying at different times. And so work life might be good, but personal life might be bad, or whatever might be happening. But recognizing that that exists, right? My job isn't to manage their lives, but my job is to understand that they're more than just an employee or more than just a colleague. The second part of empathy to me is actually understanding that every person in and of themselves, even just as an employee or as a colleague, they are a unique person. They have a unique approach, personality, perspectives, approach of how they think about problems, preferences of how they engage. And I think it's about creating space for unique individuals to come together and be a part of a team. And so I think about it from both of those angles, because a lot of times people are just like, oh, especially in COVID, people are going through a lot. So let's just back off and give them space and be empathetic. I think there's understanding that. But I think the second part is creating space for diverse individuals that have really different approaches or ways of thinking, and being empathetic to that and creating environments that allow them to be successful. One of the hot topics that I think happened during COVID was people talking a lot more about the quiet revolution, because as we moved into remote spaces, you have folks who are identifying as both introverts and extroverts, and how people show up in meetings, how they contribute. Are they the type of people who, when a meeting was in person, they're always butting in and saying something, and there are people who are quietly sitting around the edges of the table, never saying a word? And did that get infinitely worse when we moved to COVID? And are we creating the right spaces for those people to flourish in this new remote working environment? Recognizing those types of differences, I think, is actually the more important part of empathy at a company level right now, because one, we've seen a lot of changes in how companies operate and how people come together. But two, those differences in who people are, just their own personal preferences, allow some people to be more and less successful in how they collaborate with others and work with others. And what you want to do is create an environment that allows teams to be highly effective, collaborative, and able to unlock synergistic outcomes. So the 1+1 is greater than 3 type of outcomes. And that happens by creating spaces for individuals to come together, be themselves, and work well together with others. So to me, that's actually the area where I focus on when I think about being an empathetic leader. And then the second part is also recognizing if one of my employees comes to me and says, hey, I got a lot of stuff going on at work and I need to step back for a minute, like I need help. I'm like, I got you, 100%. It happens. And that, I think, is just being an empathetic human. And I think you need both of those at work.
What do some of those spaces look like when you're saying creating spaces? Because a lot of us are still remote or hybrid or whatever it may be. What has worked for you? What does that look like?
It's funny. I think about some of the folks on different working groups that I'm on, and there are some individuals who've talked to me in the background and said, "Hey, I don't feel like I can participate in this conversation live. I need space to think about some of these things." And where I find the mix of teams, not necessarily optimizing for the voices of certain individuals who may not want to engage in that format, it's finding alternative methods. So saying, "Hey, maybe for this meeting, let's do pre-reads. Let's actually get the information out ahead of time so this person can be prepared to engage or can form their thoughts ahead of the live discussion and not have to engage live as the information's rolling out because of just the way that they think and approach things." Or maybe I give them space to ping me in the background and surface ideas that I'm happy to put out there that they might feel uncomfortable saying live. Or maybe like, to me, I'm one of those people who strangely always looks at gallery view on Zoom. So even when people are projecting things, I always like expand to look at gallery view, and I'm pretty well known for staring at people's reactions and facial sort of expressions during conversations. And I'll call people out. I'll say, "Hey, it looks like you might want to say something." And just actually pausing a conversation to unlock space for people to engage. Because I do think that the ability for certain voices to be heard and brought to the table is really important, and how you create those team dynamics.
And of course, you run the risk, though, of putting someone on the spot who doesn't want to be on the spot, which I've done before. And it can be unpleasant. But if we're getting back to risk and taking risks, sometimes it's worth it. Getting back to gambling. So
See, it's going to come back.
it's going to just be the recurring theme. Yeah. The title of this will be Gambling with Linda Tong. I think that'll really drive the downloads. In terms of maintaining focus, how do you decide what to say no to?
It's really actually, it's not that hard. It's actually one of the hard part about saying no, for me at least, is disappointing people, or, people feeling like I disagree with them or don't like what they're doing, or yeah, it ultimately comes down to disappointment. It's actually quite easy for me to know what to say no to, because I usually know what are the most important things that we need to do. And I'm pretty simple-minded. I'm not some complex person with a lot of really great tooling and systems. I still do everything in notes. I write all of my notes. Everything for me is written. And in my mind, there's always a constant stack rank that's going on of what are the most important, impactful things we need to do. And I always apply product management thinking to it, which is what's the level of effort and what's the impact? And things that are low level of effort and high impact are my easy top things. The things that I say are, and then I overlay the axis of critical for a long range strategy, whether it's short term or long term investments, those things automatically get an extra push. And so my stack rank is always updated in my mind. So knowing what to say yes to is actually really easy. It's the saying no to things and disappointing people because either one, something was a top thing and has moved out, or two, something wasn't a top thing and either I or someone else didn't have the courage to shut it down early enough. And so people have put in so much effort on it that by the time you're saying no, one, people are going to be disappointed, but two, they're going to look at time that's been wasted. And that hurts. As an operator, that hurts because you're like, oh, even though it's a sunk cost fallacy, it still is sunk cost. And so knowing what to say no to actually is usually the easy part. Having the courage to say no is the hard part. And I think it's knowing that when you're making decisions that you're saying no is actually even harder. A lot of people, when they say yes to something, what they don't realize is they're actively saying no to something else, and they just don't realize it at that moment, because you really are ultimately resource constrained. And recognizing in that moment that you have basically said no to something else, figuring out what that is and circling up with that team and letting them know, that's something that I think people miss a lot.
And also not realizing that you're saying no. Early in my career, I had something that I worked on for like 3 months. And then in one meeting, like one very quick decision that was all for naught and it was all in the trash. It's so demoralizing. How do you catch those sooner than later?
It's tough, but there are signals. There's signals that you get pretty early on about things that you're allowing to go down that path of things where teams are working on something. They aren't the most important things. You're ultimately going to probably make the decision to reorient them, or even worse, you're going to let them just keep going. And they're not going to know that they're not working on something that's critical to the business. And it comes out one way or another. It's just a question of, are you direct about it, or are they going to find out on their own? And the signals you see are, one, are these things where it's like very few people are working on it? Are they things that you're actively measuring and checking in on a regular basis? Are they things that you look at and think to yourself, hey, this is a big bet. It's going to pay off really well. I think it'll be impactful for the company. If those aren't answered right away, and if you're like, yeah, there's just a team running off doing things and I'm not even checking in and I don't think there's a lot of upside, you've basically already said no to it. You've just allowed people to run down this path. And at some point, either they're going to be disappointed when you come back and say, hey, we're going to move resources, or we're going to shift direction, or this doesn't really matter. Or I think a lot of people pray that they're going to be pleasantly surprised that something's going to happen and it's going to turn into something big. And they're like, oh, look, so lucky. That never happens. Like maybe once in a million times, but that is not, realistically, that is you saying no to something. And when you see those behaviors, when you see very few resources, little attention, and no real measurement for impact, you've already said no. Now you need to articulate it.
Now, one of the things I haven't made clear in this conversation about your background is that you come from a product background. You were chief product officer at Tapjoy, I believe product manager at Google. I need to give you the opportunity. It's a great story. I need to give you the opportunity to walk us through the genesis of how a product person lands in an operation role. But also, I'm curious about, you talked about the biggest impact and least amount of work. How else have you integrated your product DNA into operations?
Yeah, I still identify as a product person. Even though I'm in operations, a big part of it is everything I do, I think about it as a product. It just may not be the ultimate customer-facing product, but it is, I'm building products internally for our company. and I have to think about who I'm building for, what do they need, what are the requirements, what's the most impactful thing I can do for them, and what resources do I have available to do it. But my evolution to getting here is quite funny. You know, I was a product person that throughout my whole career, I was a consumer product person working on mobile games, mobile ads, mobile phones, a lot of mobile. Like I'm an Android person for life, and then worked on sports. I was at the NFL leading product for them. I'm a huge sports fan. And then I ended up on enterprise products. I was working at App Dynamics, leading an observability suite. And I ended up finding myself in this role where I'm leading this enterprise product and trying to figure out how to grow this business. And one day woke up and was asked to take over as GM and basically like CEO of this company. And I was like, what gives me the ability to take that next step? And they're just like, well, we trust you. We think you can do it. And I'm like, big mistake. But sure, I'll give it a shot. And so I ended up in this role where suddenly I owned everything else, including product. And I spent very little time on product at that point because I was like, man, I have so much I have to learn, so much I need to understand, and so much I need to bring together to make this company successful. And that's when I realized that every function is so important to the success of a business. I understood how everyone plays together. I understood how, from a people perspective, the talent that you bring in fundamentally shifts your business. How, from a finance perspective, the way that you're trying to shape your model ultimately influences where you're investing and where you're not, and actually follows some of the same principles I think about from a product lens of where can we get high impact, low effort investments that are the best best payback for the company. From a sales perspective, how do we tell these stories and bring this product to life and demonstrate value for our customers? And so I could actually bring that thinking to every function, but more importantly, I could bring every function together to collaborate and make a company successful. And at that point, I realized that my product shifted from the product we were building to the company being my product. And as a GM, you're a product person and your product is the company. And as I shifted into operations, it's very much the same thinking. My job is to build a scalable company, a company that can bring on more people, actually build towards our mission, deliver value for our customers, and build world-class organizations that can scale with this business and build new organizations as we need them. And so that's a lot of the product thinking and how it's evolved. And then from a day-to-day perspective, as COO, I've had to think about things like, how do we build up, especially at Webflow, we're smaller, right? We're 100-ish people. So we're still in this fun growth phase, but building up everything from actually our OKR framework to our annual planning framework to thinking about opening up new M&A pipelines and building out a corp dev function. Every single one of these things I've thought about from a product perspective of what's the level of effort? What does it take to build these up? What's the impact of the business? So when's the right time to make this investment? And what are the kinds of outcomes that I think it'll drive to the business if I do it well? And then where am I going to place my resources to place those bets? And where am I going to spend my time? For me personally, what are my top 3 items to invest in? And so it's always followed a very similar thinking from a product perspective. It's just the product isn't the traditional product that we all think of.
Do you ever get the itch to hop back into the traditional product that we think of?
I'm deeply passionate about it. I mean, a big part of why I'm at Webflow is, as a product person, the one thing I would say is probably my downfall or like my chip on my shoulder is I'm a non-technical product person, right? I'm a product person that came from an econ background. I studied econ and math. My senior thesis was on rewriting the Medicare Act of 1965. That doesn't scream engineer to you. And so my biggest frustration as a product person was I would think about what are the problems I want to solve? What do I want us to build? And how do we build it? And I dream up these big ideas and work with designers and work with engineers. And everything I dreamt up versus what was built is never the same. That's just the reality of it. And I used to always think, if I were an engineer, I could just build it differently. I would just build it. I had that vision, I could just build it. And so that chip on my shoulders always remained. And with Webflow, we create a visual platform that allows you to abstract code and actually build websites without actually having to code. And so it starts to connect designers and, frankly, the technology that was once sort of removed from their access point to allowing them to create their visions with Webflow's visual editor without having to code. And it takes a whole step out of it. And it really scratches that itch of mine. And so I don't necessarily need to be a product person again, but I love the product that we're building. And I love making Webflow more successful because it's I think it's addressing that pain point of mine of like, how do we allow more people to innovate at scale and take their visions and turn them into a reality, even if they don't have the entire technical background required to build it?
So I'm former Automatic from way, way back when, and Automatic is WordPress. And for me, I love Webflow. I think it's brilliant. And I remember the first time that I used it because I was so used to putting together a WordPress site, but then having to go in and tweak the HTML and the CSS. And I'm like, I'm not an engineer-minded person. I mean, I know how to do it. It's just not done well. And then I remember Webflow, and I was like, okay, this is really cool. And WordPress, you might have some competition here finally. But yeah, I love the product. Now, you saw me dive off screen for just a second, and I wasn't being rude. It was because I now remembered that you are a mobile phone addict, and I wanted to share with you my mobile phone collection. For those of you listening to this, I'm currently holding up, I don't know, must be 15 different phones in a different stack. All of these are Android, by the way. Do you have a favorite Android?
I mean, I have to go OG, the T-Mobile G1 with the slide up and the keyboard.
Oh,
So
yes.
solid. The sliding
Yeah.
mechanism was such a beautiful gesture.
Yeah, it switched
Yeah,
and you could just flick. It was like spring
so
action.
good.
I know exactly which one you're talking about. That's amazing. I need one of them then because I don't have that one anymore. What about, and we're totally nerding out on smartphones, so people are gonna completely tune out now. They're like, oh, this is, boy, did this conversation go south. For me, old school Nexus
Yes.
5X was such a great phone, and I wish they stuck with it. Anyways, I
I don't know if
digress.
you remember the Nexus One. It had this small little light up scroll ball. And so it was a single flat design. And then instead of like a wheel or something, it was a tiny little ball and it lit up and you would like move the ball around. It was kind of like old school gaming consoles. It was just like a ball to move around the screen. It was just beautiful. I loved it. It didn't have great ergonomics. It was like not that useful. You're better just like dealing with a touch screen. But I just thought it was so fun.
So, because we're talking about phones, and then we will come back to this conversation, but now we're scratching a mutual itch that we love. What is it about phones? What that you're just so enthused about?
I think phones are really cool in that, I mean, we talk about AI right now, right? It's like AI is the hottest thing. And they're like, yeah, AI can be your personal assistant. And I'm like, phones are your personal assistant. Phones are your everything. Everything you need can come in a phone and it can come with you wherever you're going. And it can carry whatever you want in such a small form factor with such powerful CPU and RAM. You can literally do everything you would do on a laptop now on a phone outside of really high powered, like gaming and a lot of visual editing, things like that. But it's getting there. And to me, for a form factor like that to be that powerful and to go be on the go with you, it's like having a superpower that just sits in your pocket. So I love that about it. I think the other thing about it that I've always wanted to unlock, and this actually goes back to a previous company called NextBit that I was at, we were a bunch of ex-Android folks that came together with this vision that the hardware of a phone should be, frankly, kind of just like whatever. And the key is actually the operating system being truly a cloud operating system, such that as long as the hardware has all the components you need, you should be able to go from any physical device to device and authenticate, whether it's with biometrics or with a password or with an account. But you should be able to authenticate and bring down all of your apps, all of your content, all your data, and you could interact with any sort of dumb piece of glass. Right. I could go to an airport and interact with a kiosk and it would be like, oh, hey, Linda, and I would pull out my things. I could just pick up a phone in a store, move all of my apps, all of my states to that device. The idea of buying a new phone still is kind of painful. It shouldn't be. It literally, your entire OS should live in the cloud, and then it should come down to you by different form factor based off of authentication. And I still think that is the future. I think we still have a ways to go, but I really believe in truly like existing within a cloud environment and then hardware being a touch point in which you access that data.
Now you've got me thinking about just latency and high-speed connections. Okay, getting away from shared passions and schmoozing and getting back to why people actually listen to this podcast. Uh, so getting back to App Dynamics, you came in and your mandate was to create an innovation lab. We've talked about empathy. We've talked about psychological safety. We've talked about celebrating bad ideas. I think we all want to have an innovation lab. One, how do you go about doing that? When you first got there, you were like, okay, we're going to create an innovation lab. Now what?
Oh my gosh, it was hilarious because a lot of people were like, how did you get this kind of a boondoggle job? Way to get a very unclear, awesome sounding job. How exactly are you going to do this? And I was given a meaningful budget. And I think people were just waiting to see, one, they're waiting for me to fail, but two, they're waiting to see what crazy ideas was I going to come up with. And I went back to that thesis of build relationships, bring people together that don't come together on a regular basis, create a space for them to come together, and then actually create a mindset shift where when they come together, they think differently. And so actually my first deed with that budget that I got was actually cordoning off a space within our physical, this pre-pandemic. So cordoning off a space in our office, literally putting up different wallpaper, a completely different look and feel. I closed off the space. We put couches in there. We put up a neon sign. We had bookshelves with different books. So just open up your mind. We brought in building blocks and Legos and toys. But it was a space that when you walked into, it felt completely different. It was wildly off from every other space inside the building. And we said, hey, when you come into the innovation lab, we literally called it the innovation lab. When you come into this lab, you come here to think differently. You come here to connect with people. And we hosted everything from happy hours to working with teams when they did offsites to bringing them into the lab and helping them to work through problems. And then we also hosted hackathons and different events. And we would bring people through the lab and we would brand everything we did with the innovation lab. So it intentionally set a different mindset when people started to engage with us. And we created these little boxes. Think about it as like lab in a box that had toys and prompts and games such that before you even got started, they would prompt you to think differently. So they'd prompt you to play games or start to think about crazy ideas before you even got into solving something so that you have a mindset shift before your team even got started on problem solving. But that was a big part of it. And through that program, one, we ran the first company-wide hackathon, and the ideas were off the wall. We had some people who were literally building machines to bake meatballs. It was all over the place, but what it did was it brought people together from different functions because we said, hey, one of the rules, the constraints of this hackathon is you have to work with at least two other people who are in different functional groups than yours. So you can't have three engineers. You have to go through different functional groups. We also said that for the groups, you got extra points if you met net new people that you've never worked with. You got even more points if your idea was basically not obvious. So we said, hey, come solve these problems. And if people came back with completely off the wall ideas, we gave them extra points. And then we helped facilitate sessions inside of the lab that as people did them, they essentially got more and more exposure, more and more support. And so a lot of our core theories of building relationships and different mindsets and literally changing your space could really come through in that hackathon and through all the other activities that we ran. And so that was the first phase of building an innovation lab, literally having a lab.
Linda, thanks so much. Time for my favorite question. We've all had those crazy moments when we're in the seat and something wild pops up and we're just like, wow, I never thought I'd see that. Do you have one you can share with us?
Totally. Besides the fact that the past few years have just been every single day is like that with AI, one very real prominent thing, for those who are in Silicon Valley, or maybe actually not even Silicon Valley, but bank in Silicon Valley, a couple years ago, SVB had that bank crisis. And, we had some exposure there. And you just don't expect these things to happen. You don't expect to suddenly question like, oh my gosh, like what's going to happen with the money that's in the bank. And, we, like many other companies, we had payroll the following week and we had to think about how do we make sure that we can pay our employees. And it was probably the craziest, it happened on a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Like, I don't think I slept a wink. And I was trying to figure out all the logistics. And you learn that if you don't make payroll, like you actually have to furlough your employees. Otherwise, you could actually be in very real trouble. And so you learn all these things that you don't even think you ever needed to know. And, luckily everything worked out great in the end. And like, what was most exciting about that time is you never want a crisis. You never want to have one of these crises happen to you at a company, but it was also one of my brightest moments because I saw our whole company come together. Like, people didn't panic. Like, we rallied, we communicated, we supported each other, we like problem solved together. So many people dropped everything they were doing that weekend so that we can come together and just make sure we can stabilize and like, reduce any risk. And ultimately everything worked out in the end. And if you just fast forward and skip that whole week, nothing would be different. But like those 4 days, they age you so much. And it was just, yeah, it's one of those things that like one day I'll be talking to like kids, 4 or 5 generations away. I'll be like, a long time ago, there's a bank crisis. But that was absolutely wild. Yeah, exactly. And they'll be like, what, AI?
You're making it sound like the 1930s. Like it was.
Exactly. Was it the Depression?
Yeah. Oh, that's wild. That's wild. Linda, thanks so much for joining me. This has been one of my favorite conversations, but don't tell my other guests about it.
Of course not. Of course not.
All right. And thank you all to listening to Between Two COOs. Linda, where can everyone go to keep up with you?
They can find me on Twitter at YayLT, YAYLT, or check me out on LinkedIn.
YAYLT so fits your personality. I love it. All right. Well, thank you so much, Linda. And thank you all. Tune in next time for our next COO chat. Might be with a CEO. You never know here. And go to between2coos.com for more. And please go to your podcast platform of choice and rate this podcast so other people can learn as much and hear from amazing operators like Linda. Thanks for listening. Tune in next time. And until then, so long. Hey, it's Michael. If you've been on a Zoom with me lately, you'll notice that you have my full attention. It's because I'm not taking notes. Instead, I rely on Fellow, an AI meeting assistant, to take notes for me, along with tracking action items and decisions, handling recordings, transcripts, and summaries, all in one secure platform. It's kind of like magic. Built with security and privacy at its core, Fellow is the only AI meeting assistant that thousands of leaders and organizations trust to capture meeting notes and recordings while keeping your data safe. They're so confident that you'll love it, they're offering an insane deal to you all, Between Two COOs listeners. 90 days of unlimited AI-powered note-taking and recording completely free. Visit fellow.app/COO to sign up today and experience the AI meeting assistant trusted by leaders everywhere.